Welcome back to Overdue Review's slog through all the James Bond adventures. I'm Clint Davis, and today I'm taking a look at 1985's A View to a Kill, which is notable for being the only James Bond movie to feature both Dolph Lundgren and Papillon Susu.
Mr. St. John Smith?
St. John Smith, my dear.
But seriously, this action-packed adventure was the 14th entry into the James Bond Eon canon, and it was the last ride for the late, great Roger Moore. By this point, we'd spent 7 movies with Sir Raj, going from outer space to the swamps of New Orleans to the circus, and by the time A View to a Kill hit theaters, Roger Moore was almost 60 years old, and it was starting to show.
Another excellent choice.
I'm pleased you approve, since you're paying the bill. Cheers.
But how was Roger Moore's last mission on Her Majesty's Secret Service? Let's break it down. This one actually has a pretty fresh storyline in which Bond tries to thwart a tech billionaire from destroying Silicon Valley in order to get a stranglehold on the world's computer chip manufacturing.
I propose to end the domination of Silicon Valley and leave us in control of that market.
A View to a Kill hit theaters during the early reign of Apple's Macintosh and the first wave of personal computing. And we had seen plenty of timeless villains who get rich off of oil or precious metals, but, having a young tech wizard be the maniac here was pretty cutting edge for the Bond series. We'll get to Christopher Walken's performance as that villain later, but first, let's talk about 007 himself. At 57 years old, Roger Moore was pushing the limits of credibility as both a high-octane action star and a notorious Lothario. In the post-Viagra days, sure, I could buy it, but back in 1985, I would think Bond's PP-7 would have run out of ammo sometime around The Spy Who Loved Me. James is like a Ralph Lauren catalog model in this film. He attends horse races, he actually rides a horse at a steeplechase event, he hangs from a rope attached to a blimp, and of course he does a little skiing. Wait a minute, he hangs from a rope that's dangling from a blimp? First off, the idea that Bond has that kind of arm strength is laughable. Do you ever remember seeing Roger Moore's James Bond pumping iron in any of the movies? Now, the film actually opens with Bond on the slopes on his skis until he starts snowboarding? Snowboarding in 1985? What, did James Bond invent the sport? And I looked it up, and snowboarding had been around since the 1960s, but this movie, and this scene specifically, is credited a little bit with making the sport more mainstream popular. Oh, and if you had any doubts that this was a Roger Moore Bond movie, yeah, those are immediately erased when California Girl starts cranking over the snowboarding scene. It's just about as silly and lighthearted as it gets, which is par for the course with a Roger Moore Bond movie. A View to a Kill does give Roger Moore some very memorable action sequences. Along with that silly blimp scene, he gets to drive in a great car chase along the Seine River in Paris. And I mean, this is a great car chase. This is like some Michael Caine Italian Job shit, where he drives backward down stairs, he jumps a tour bus, and he gets both the top and back of the car knocked off while continuing to drive it. This little car gets beat to hell but keeps on going. It's one of the best driving sequences from any Bond movie, even if the stunt doubles look nothing like Roger Moore. He also has this great fight scene with a couple goons on a conveyor belt early in the picture. It was impressively choreographed, and Bond icon John Glenn did a nice job directing this. Definitely a fun fight scene. And of course, Moore also gets to show off his comedic chops a few times, especially when he berates an undercover MI6 agent who's posing as his servant.
Well, don't stand there panting, Tibbet. Start the unpacking. Here, let me help.
Yes, sir. Oh, thank you, sir.
Bond is just constantly giving this guy hell, making him carry his bags and cracking on him non-stop.
When you're ready, Tibbet.
And the script, of course, gave Roger Moore the chance to drop one last signature off-color one-liner.
Will you keep still?
Do you know what I'm sitting on?
I'm trying not to think about it.
But just like in For Your Eyes Only, the age of Roger Moore makes some of the romantic stuff just a little bit creepy, especially given the age gap between he and his female co-stars. First off, we get an incredibly condescending instance of sexual harassment committed against a young female MI6 agent as she and Bond are riding in a submarine that looks like the shittiest iceberg ever. Moore was almost twice the age of his co-star Tanya Roberts, which makes their relationship dubious. Not to mention the scene where he tucks her into bed. I also want to admonish Bond for using the lamest pseudonym of all time in this movie. At one point, he poses as a journalist for the London Financial Times, whose name is none other than
Stock. James Stock. Thank you, Mr. Howard.
He really threw him off with that one. Let's talk about the ladies.
Keep your guard up, Hyler, and retain your balance.
First off, I have to ask, what happened to the new girl at MI6 that Moneypenny had sharing the reception area in Octopussy? She vanished without a trace. When it comes to the women of A View to a Kill, it's basically two very different stories. First, we have Mayday, a secondary villain played by 80s style icon Grace Jones. Now, Grace Jones is one of the most striking human beings in history, so the writers didn't have to give Mayday too much to do in order for her to be memorable. But thankfully, they give her plenty to sink her teeth into.
Steady, steady!
She must take a lot of vitamins.
Perhaps Pegasus does too.
Mayday is a very strong and very intimidating woman. Did I mention she's very strong?
You intend to fight it?
We meet Mayday early in the movie where we see her killing a guy in an incredible way, before sprinting up the Eiffel Tower and eventually jumping off of it. Now that is how you introduce an action character. And if Agent 007's hypersexuality is one of the things that gets on your nerves about these movies, you'll love the scene where Mayday cockblocks Bond.
I suppose you travel a lot.
Your helicopter leaves in 20 minutes.
But if those things didn't make you a Mayday fan, her death certainly will. Not only does she get blown into smithereens, she does it on her own terms, damn it.
Mayday.
To put it simply, Mayday is one of the greatest women in the history of the Bond franchise, and certainly one of the most memorable. She even shows some depth of character, which is extremely rare for any secondary villain in this entire franchise. But unfortunately, she's only half the story when it comes to the women of A View to a Kill. Tanya Roberts plays Stacy Sutton, the granddaughter of an oil baron who has a grudge with Christopher Walken's villain, Max Zorin. She works as a geologist and actually shows her own depth of character when she tears up a $5 million check given to her as hush money.
I'd sell everything and live in a tent before I give up.
And yes, that is Donna's mom, Midge, from That 70s Show.
No, I'm not interested in horses.
She's like a Diet Coke version of Kathleen Turner from Body Heat, especially when she wears the skimpiest robe known to man. Good God, what is the point of even wearing that thing? Now, I am in no way comparing the quality of these two movies, but A View to a Kill actually starts to feel a little bit like Roman Polanski's Chinatown once the action moves to San Francisco and Stacy's introduced. We've got Bond searching through city government records, we've got issues with water and geological surveys, and there's even a blatant nod to Chinatown when a cop tells Bond that that's where they found a CIA colleague dead.
Found his body in Chinatown.
What?
That is before Bond lays him out with a fire hose. But Stacy just really does not add anything to the movie. She's played as a stumbling boob who's constantly shrieking and nearly getting killed. But I will give her credit for somehow knowing how to drive a fire engine and get away from a bunch of Keystone cops in a scene that Terminator 3 totally ripped off. And I totally blame the writers for Stacy's failure as a character because, after we had Maud Adams in Octopussy and Carol Bouquet in A View to a Kill, Stacy just seems helpless and naggy.
Don't leave me! James!
The best example of this comes in a scene where she and James are trapped in a fire, and instead of helping herself, she berates Bond, screaming at him. Oh, and she also pronounces James as James! James!
James!
Chames, I believe is how that's spelled. Of course, he does triumphantly carry her out and down a ladder while she's completely motionless. It's such a cheesy and dated scene. Without her geological knowledge, which helps thwart Zoran's evil plan, Stacy would be completely useless in this plot. As far as the other ladies go, there's a preppy young woman named Jenny Flex who appears at Zoran's estate. I thought the way they styled her was gorgeous, and she was proper as can be with this nice androgynous hairstyle. And Bond also shares a hot tub in one scene with a KGB agent named Pola Ivanova, in a scene that was obviously taken later by Austin Powers. She does get one of the best lines in the entire movie.
The bubbles tickle my Tchaikovsky.
Let's get to the bad guys.
If you're the best they have, they'll more likely try to cover up your embarrassing incompetence.
Don't count on it, Zoran.
You amuse me, Mr. Bond.
Well, it's not mutual.
Okay, I already covered Mayday, and as I said, she's fantastic and is definitely considered the movie's secondary villain. But the main villain is truly one of the most memorable and brutal psychopaths ever in a Bond movie. Christopher Walken plays Max Zorin, the head of a microchip company. He apparently speaks at least 5 languages with no accent. He's slimy as hell and is insanely rich. Like own your own blimp rich. If you've seen any James Bond movies, you've already seen extravagant wealth, but the high society in this movie is as hoity-toity as it gets. Zorin breeds thoroughbreds and trains them at his home in France, which is positively obscene. I mean, that's the kind of place that would make Robin Leach blush. Walken, in his performance, is immediately magnetic and obviously arrogant from his first interaction with Moore. It's one of those great scenes where both men know the other is an adversary, but none of the cards are on the table yet, so it's all just innuendo.
What about fishing? Fly casting?
I'm neglecting my other guests. Enjoy yourself, you'll find the young lady stimulating company.
I'm sure that...
And if the scene where you see Max pinning Mayday after a wrestling match makes you roll your eyes, as it did me, it's actually explained later by the fact that he was genetically boosted with steroids inside his mother's womb as part of some East German experiment. You know, that revelation actually makes me feel kind of bad for this creepy brat. But not for long. His plan to create a massive earthquake that will flood Silicon Valley, killing everyone and destroying the businesses there so that he can have a monopoly on the microchip market, is ruthless. And when someone refuses to go along with that plan, he has Mayday throw him out of his aforementioned blimp.
So, does anybody else want to drop out?
Nice. I gotta tell you, Max Zorin actually might be the craziest Bond villain of them all. Check out him laughing at his own death. And he's also one mean son of a bitch. He just blows up a mine shaft while a bunch of his own employees are inside it. This is actually a pretty frightening scene. And in one of the most violent scenes in Bond history, he actually shoots at the survivors with a machine gun as they try to run for their lives. Meanwhile, he's smiling the entire time he's firing at them. It is sadistic shit. But for as ruthless and apparently smart as Max Zorin is, he does commit the ultimate Bond villain sin by repeatedly missing obvious chances to kill Bond. The first time, he decides to knock Bond out and leave him in a sinking car to meet his demise, rather than just shooting him. Then, he has another golden chance to kill 007 point blank, but instead opts to elaborately kill him by trapping him in an elevator and burning him alive. Shockingly, it doesn't work. And finally, he could easily just cut the rope that Bond is hanging from off his blimp, but of course he doesn't. Max Zorin is one of the best Bond villains in the history of the franchise, and the combination of him and Mayday together in one film make A View to a Kill a dream for lovers of Bond villains.
Meeting you with a view to a kill.
Ah, my favorite part, the opening song. Now, from the first notes of A View to a Kill, this song immediately kicks more ass than Octopussy's terrible opening song. It's much more in your face than the past few laid-back soft rock Bond songs have been, and getting Duran Duran to do the song was a huge get for the producers. I mean, Duran Duran was one of the biggest bands in the world at the time, and their song went on to become a #1 hit in the United States. So this was, for a while at least, the most successful Bond song ever done. If having a 60-year-old James Bond hitting on chicks and snowboarding doesn't make your movie cool with the kids, then Duran Duran will. I love the chorus of this song, and I would put A View to a Kill up there with Duran Duran's absolute best tunes. They co-wrote the song with the legendary John Barry, who went on to do the movie score. And I love how Barry actually uses this song as a motif later on in the score of the movie. You'll notice it throughout the film. It's a nice little touch. As far as the visuals go over this song, we get glow paint and makeup galore. It's pretty cheesy stuff, but I do love the look of this woman with red hair that looks like dancing flames. She's just enjoying a drug-fueled weekend at Burning Man, dude. We also get a little synchronized skiing, and we get Bond shooting lasers and what looks like the Target logo out of his pistol. The visuals are very cheesy and actually look pretty low rent, but the song is easily the most energetic since Wings did Live and Let Die. This was the first time the Bond movies would embrace the MTV generation, and it was a necessary thing.
What a view
To a kill.
We get to spend some time in some serious high society during this movie. We go to Siberia for some skiing. We go to Paris for dinner in the Eiffel Tower. We go to the French countryside for some horse racing. And finally to San Francisco, where the action of the movie slows considerably. And what trip to San Francisco would be complete without a visit to the Golden Gate Bridge? Seriously, is there any more cliche set piece than an action sequence on the Golden Gate Bridge? I would actually love to see a movie set in San Francisco where we don't see the Golden Gate Bridge once and we don't even hear it mentioned and no one has a fight on it and no one's car drives off the edge of it. That would be fantastic, but it's never going to happen. And the Golden Gate Bridge, by the way, is totally misused here. The fight scene at the top of it is awkward as hell, with the quarters just way too close, and the idea that they could stand on this steep metal incline and fight without falling is ridiculous. Alright, even though the final fight was anticlimactic, Zorn's death is fantastic. I don't know about you, but I can never get enough shots of a dummy just falling 500 feet through the air. There's something so great about that. Overall, the locations in A View to a Kill are just more pedestrian than other Bond outings. There's nothing even remotely exotic here. It's just basic white people destinations, like San Francisco and Paris.
But that means I would have to be
Dead.
I give A View to a Kill 3.5 martinis out of 5. And I'm actually glad Roger Moore came back to do another movie, because this is a more fitting finale for him to step out of the role. And it's actually one of his strongest efforts. But just like almost all the Roger Moore Bond movies, it's just not quite perfect. Most of the time, the plot just seems to go nowhere, leaving you wondering what Bond is even trying to accomplish during most of the movie. But the hair, costumes, and villains are among the absolute best of the entire franchise. But who was the MVP of this Bond adventure? My Golden Gun Award for the best performance in the movie goes to Grace Jones as Mayday. It was tough not to give it to Christopher Walken, but Mayday is just as unforgettable as anyone in the entire Bond franchise. Her look, her base jumping skills, her raw power, and her awesome death are the best things about A View to a Kill. Thanks for watching. You can check out more reviews at overduereview.com, and also you can listen to my podcast, The Stream Police Podcast, which is available at iTunes, at Acast, at Stitcher, and basically anywhere that you listen to podcasts.